We are all waiting for a date to be announced. What is the date for? The date is when you and me are going to join thousands of Zimbabweans, if not millions, to choose the next government. But while we are waiting for that date, what do? We profile candidates, aspiring candidates, presidential, senators, members of parliament and councillors. This is your program, hashtag the candidate 2018, where we talk about the new Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwe that you want. This is a program where we invite everyone who thinks they have potential to take Zimbabwe to another level. And today in the studio, I have another candidate who have said, I want to take Zimbabwe forward with your mandate. But what do? Just like our Facebook page, and every time we go live on air, you will get a notification and you will never be left out with our informative and educative program. My name is Robert Tapumane. This is the program, hashtag the candidate 2018. And today, open course, we will build a great nation by unleashing the incredible potential and the promise of the Zimbabwean people, close quote. These are the words of Dr. Noah Manyika, the leader of Build Zimbabwe Alliance. Doctor, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
No,
on the ground. But no, I've actually been here in the country for over a year now.
Okay, great to know that.
Yes.
Build Zimbabwe Alliance.
Yes.
Is it a pressure group? Is it a political party?
No, it's a political party. So the way it started, you remember, the way it started was that we lent our voice to what was going on in the country in the past couple of years. And at that time when, the protest movement in this country was at its infancy, really, and we saw the response of the government to people just demanding their democratic rights or trying to hold their government accountable, that the response was draconian and the protests of the people were criminalized. So we started lending our voice to that early on, and then it continues just building up, and we started realizing that it's one thing to just lend your voice. It's another to really say, I really want to be part of the solution in more ways than just protesting. So in October of 2016, we actually registered as a political party, and we've continued to build up, talk about what our plans are in the communities and so on. So yeah, here we are today.
So okay, so it is, you, as you said, you have been on the ground, and this is where you are today.
Yes.
Because you've already launched your manifesto.
Yes.
And the reason why I started with this is there's a word that has been going on, especially on the social media.
Yes.
That Dr. Noah Manyika and his party, we know who owns that party. This is what they are saying.
Right.
They are saying Dr. Manyika is doing the groundwork for one rich businessman who is based outside the country. Then once they've tested the waters, then maybe probably in 2023, that's when you come and say, I'm not taking over. Can you just clarify?
Zimbabwe is a fun place that way. When it comes to rumors and so on, I have no idea who that rich businessman is. I suspect I know who is being implied, who I have never met at all, and so on. Look, I'm just another Zimbabwean who is saying it's time for change in our country. I'm not doing this for anyone except for me and for my children and for the Zimbabwean citizens out there who are saying enough is enough. And it puzzles me sometimes where these stories come from. Because some people talk with such authority about things that they don't know about. But that's the nature of the game these days. Social media empowers everybody. It empowers people who don't have any information, but who claim to have information. It empowers people who are uninformed. It empowers people who are informed. So no, I'm not doing anybody's groundwork for them. We are doing this as citizens who really want to see change in our country.
But you're talking of change. There are other political parties that has been there. Probably there are others like the one that is led by Egypt, it's named Nendra. There are others that are led by Morgan Changirai, and there are others that are led by Dr. Ngosana Moi. They all want change. Yes. What is this that the change that Build Zimbabwe Alliance wants to bring, which is different from what the other political parties are talking about?
Well, I can't speak for other political parties, obviously. I mean, they have a responsibility to go out there and educate the masses with their manifestos or their programs. So, I can't speak on their behalf. I can tell you what we want to accomplish.
Yes.
I believe that what Zimbabwe is facing is a very, very serious leadership problem. And it manifests itself in economic dysfunction. It manifests itself in services not being properly delivered, in the queues that we see in the banks, and all of that. It manifests itself in young people graduating from school and not getting jobs for 3-4 years. It manifests in people beginning to build their houses 10 years ago and not being able to finish them. It manifests in people going to hospitals and not getting their medical care. We have a leadership crisis in this country, and each and every one of us must do whatever we can to make sure that every Zimbabwean can participate in the process of determining the direction of our country or building it. So what we decided to do was, look, we need to establish a platform which makes it easy for Zimbabweans, wherever they are, to actually get into the political process. As you know, the culture of politics in our country and in many countries is that if you come in, maybe you have been out of the country for a while, or maybe you've just not been in the political business, but you're in the country, and but now you feel that you have a calling to it, or you could actually solve problems in a certain community and so on, and you have the competencies and skills to do that. You go and you try and participate in that process through a political party, and they'll ask you, where have you been for the past 5 years? Yes. You have to be in the party structures for 5 years. What has that got to do with the urgent problems that we have on the ground and which need urgent attention? So the Build Zimbabwe Alliance is a platform for people who actually want to give their all to bring about change in the country. And you know what, I don't know if the other political parties, that's what they're doing, but I can tell you what we're doing. Yes. We're making it easy, attractive, inspiring for people to get into politics, because everything affects us. Politics affects everything about our lives.
We have also seen that because of the unemployment that is in the country, and the many political parties that are coming up, especially towards the elections, to some it has become a source of employment, where once join BZA, and I know at the end of the month I also get an allowance and survive. And to a certain extent, there might not be genuine political parties or people who want to genuinely lead and solve Zimbabwean problems. How then can you tell that this is not a genuine member of our political party? Well,
you know what, democracy is messy, Tafuma. We are fighting for democracy, and that's the nature of democracy. And if you have an environment such as we have in our country, where there's been so much dysfunction and there's no rule of law and so on, and even the processes of registering political parties, some of the guys who have been in power have deliberately made it so easy so that they can cloud the make it confusing for people by making it so easy for people to register political parties. That's what's there. The responsibility that we have as political parties to make sure that we are a credible organization, and we are actually making sure that those people who then say they want to run on our ticket are credible leaders. And we vet, we vet. And, the thing about it is that if you come to the Build Zimbabwe Alliance and you're thinking that you're going to get a job, you're going to be disappointed, because this is about people who feel called to this and who resource themselves really to do the things that we do.
Assuming that one wants to be a councillor, what qualifications are you looking at? Because we have seen over the years where we have councillors that have been elected into office, either urban or rural. Some of them can't even articulate the Urban Councils Act to an extent that they just go, sit, get their allowances, and go home at the end of the day. And yet you see that in terms of service delivery, nothing is moving on.
But Tafuma, that question speaks to a larger problem in our country. you know, there are people who look at the office of a councillor and they look down upon it. You know, there are educated people who say, you know, there's no way I'm going to be, I can't be a councillor. You know, so in the end, you have those people who run for council offices being who they are, you know, until Zimbabweans understand the impact of having the wrong councillor representing them. You know, we're always going to have that problem. So, you know what? People who have experience running businesses can make very good councillors. And we're encouraging that. So, you know, over the years, I think there's been this idea that, well, you know, the MP position is for people with a certain education in a party, or with a certain level of exposure and all that. And the council position is just for, you know,
political party supporters.
Yeah, political party supporters. That's really, really the terrible thing that is happening in our country today. So we invest a lot of time in identifying potential council candidates, but we also invest a lot of time in training.
Okay.
So I actually do sessions, our executive does sessions with councillors and MPs, and you know, it's wonderful that you've cited the case of a councillor who can't even articulate the Urban Councils Act. Well, it's the same even at MP level. There are some people who run for MP who have never read the Constitution of the country. And if you have never read the Constitution of the country, then you don't know what the responsibilities of an MP are. You can't start learning that after you are elected. So we do a lot of sessions, and every meeting, so we don't do normal meetings at the Build Zimbabwe Alliance. You're asking me, this is some of the work that we've been doing on the ground. Everything that you would call a meeting in another political party, for us, it's a learning and teaching session. It's a training session. It's a, you know, and I say to some of our leaders, you know, you spend a month without reading a book, you're dangerous to yourself. And you're going to be a very, very dangerous leader, because what it means is that you think that your ideas are the only ones that work. We need leaders who learn. We need leaders, even when they are on the job, they continue to improve themselves. And so that's our, you know, ethic as the Build Zimbabwe Alliance.
You talked about reading the Constitution. I even know some members of parliament serving currently who doesn't even know that at the back of their ID there's some information. They've never read it.
Right.
So how do you expect someone to read a 280?
Well, you know what, if this is something, if this is, you know, now when it comes to, you're going to be an MP, you're going to be serving the interests of the people, and you're going to be discharging duties which are constitutionally defined, then you have to read the Constitution. You have to read the Constitution. You know, there's no way you can be an effective MP if you've never read the Constitution. Because the matters that are going to come before you, the legislative matters that are going to come before you, have constitutional implications. Almost everything that you do in Parliament has some kind of constitutional implication. So, you know, you are expected to have read the Constitution and to continue reading it. The Constitution is not just for constitutional lawyers. In fact, we go even beyond that, and we encourage people who are in our membership to read the Constitution, because as a citizen, how are you going to demand a right that you are not aware of? You know, if someone violates your constitutional right, how are you going to demand redress, you know, if you don't even know that your constitutional right has been infringed upon? So that's our approach as the Build Zimbabwe Alliance. And is it easy? No, it's not easy to change a culture where people don't read, you know, and people assume they know things that they don't know.
Because they read maybe from the media.
Maybe because they read from the media, or you know, they read from the internet. You know, so it's not an easy thing. It's quite a job of work, but it's worth it.
So you've already identified the councillors who are going to represent your party, and members of parliament, and those who are going to stand for senatorial positions.
We have, and we're also in the process of. And sometimes, you know, at the beginning of the process, there is the first wave that comes because, you know, there's a new political party, there's a, you know, a new idea that's there. But then, you know, along the way, you know, you vet. And in the process, sometimes you suggest to people, I think you'd be more effective as an MP. I think you'd be more effective as a councillor. I think you'd be more effective as a senator. You know, when you look at their, you know, core competencies and so on, what they bring to the table. And also, sometimes there's a mismatch between what people want to accomplish and the positions they go after. An MP is not going to solve the water problem in a location. Service delivery is solved by a councillor. You know, so you've got to match, you know, what the goals that people have and the positions that they're looking for.
And there is MDC Alliance, there is People's Rainbow Coalition, then there is ZANU-PF. MDC and People's Rainbow Coalition, it's a grouping of political parties that have come together.
Yes.
Because probably they share common ideas on how to take Zimbabwe forward. BZA, Build Zimbabwe Alliance. Is it a grouping of a political party, or it is the alliance just in a name?
So that's a very a good question. So why did we go with alliance right from the beginning? Because for us, we were going to form a platform for people, citizens, and institutions as well, to come into alliance to accomplish the goals of bringing about change to our country and building it. So right from the beginning, our DNA was, look, we are an alliance in that sense. So people can come together who may even say, you know what, I used to belong to that political party, or I still do. But, you know, I really subscribe to these values, and I really believe that this platform would be the best one for me to effect change. And we're also open to, you know, other political formations as well, coming into that alliance as well. So that's what we've been from the beginning. And as you know, our formation preceded a lot of these alliances, the alliances that you cite. They came registered in 2016.
Again, open courts. A great Zimbabwe will not be built by leaders who are dismissive of the pain of its citizens or by falsifying history. Close quote. What do you mean?
Well, you know, if we are going to build that special social contract where each and every Zimbabwean can fully participate in determining the direction of our country or building the country, then every Zimbabwean's opinions, every Zimbabwean's experiences, they have to feel that those are valued by the people who are in leadership. And you're actually being invited into this partnership of building the country. Now, if you're dismissive of other people's pain, if you think, recently I watched the interviews that the president had, and he was asked, if he would apologize for some of the things that happened in Matabeleland. And I was clearly very distressed by the fact that he was not able to apologize. And now, so some people would say, well, apologizing means you are culpable. But let me say this. At the time when there was the violence that there was in Matabeleland, some of us who do not belong to the tribe that bore the brunt of that violence were quiet, as our fellow citizens were suffering, right? And even if it's just for that you were quiet, it is necessary for us to say we are sorry. And I was a young journalist, and as we were training as young journalists, one of the things that was very clear was that the expectation was we had to vilify Joshua Nkomo, and we had to say, you know what, the government is right in everything that it is doing. That was the culture that was being built. And as I say, as young journalists, we did that. We're very dismissive of what was going on and so on. Now, here is the reason why I am concerned about that. I'm concerned about that because a leader who can't empathize with people who have lost relatives, some who have lost limbs, it's hard for me to see how that leader can empathize with somebody who is simply suffering from poverty.
But President E.D., I'm not defending him. I'm just highlighting it. He was asked in a foreign country by a foreign journalist if he can say sorry to the people in that region. Probably if the people in that region or Zimbabweans had asked him, are you going to say sorry? Probably was going to give us a different answer from what he said.
Somebody asked me that, another journalist asked me that question. I said, oh yeah, so this interview was being watched by foreigners, right? I mean, look, the fact that you are saying something in a foreign country, you are asked in a foreign country, you are asked locally, it doesn't change anything.
Okay.
Yeah, the people who are watching it are Zimbabweans. The people who heard it are the people who went through this pain. So to me, it doesn't matter where you are. If you're a leader and you want people to understand that you're going to be really empathetic, then you've got to have the courage to say you're sorry. You have to have the decency to say that. You know, look, Father Mkonori, what people don't realize is that a lot of these things that I am saying are things that were said by people like Father Mkonori. He published a book in 2014, and the book is called The Origins of Violence in Zimbabwe. And he talks about how what happened in Matabeleland was unprecedented. Unprecedented. That means it has never happened at that scale. For that reason alone, you know, that you're talking about something that is so unprecedented that even your mentor, Robert Mugabe, said this was a moment of madness. For that reason alone,
but why,
it's necessary.
But why in 2018 is the Gukurahundi issue generated quite a lot of interest as we go towards the elections?
No, but I think for me, I'll talk about for me. Well, for the people who went through pain, whether it's 2018 or 2020, I mean, people are still going to be in pain. I mean, if you lost your loved one, it doesn't matter when, you know, the pain is still going to be there, you know. So it's not a matter of, you know, now we're approaching 2018. It's a matter of us as leaders doing the right thing. But I'll tell you, for me, again, it goes back to what I just said earlier on. There's something that reveals the kind of leader that you are. And for me, it's not just about Gukurahundi. It's about whether you are going to care that people in Hatfield who haven't had water for 16, 17 years, some of them don't even know what it means anymore. Don't even have a frame of reference that toilet. You know, I asked some people in Hatfield the other day, and they said, we don't. I said, so how exactly do you handle it? And they said, well, we take turns, we dump, and then the next person dumps, and then after 5 or 6 dumps, that's when we can actually say, you know, let's use this water now. That's horrific in this country. If you are going to, everything that you do and everything that you say as a leader reveals who you are.
Okay. If BZA is going to win the next elections and form a new government, how are you going to deal with the Matabeleland issue? No,
you deal with it exactly the way that I've just said. You have to, when you have a public platform and people ask you and people are feeling a certain way, as a leader you should be able to say, you know what, I feel your pain, I understand exactly where you're coming from, and if what makes you feel that I really value a citizen is saying to you, I'm sorry, I'm going to say I'm sorry. And in fact, I don't even have to say if that's what makes you feel good. It should be coming from inside me. And then from there, you create a space for the kinds of conversations then that lead to whatever other solutions emerge from that conversation. You don't predetermine, you know, exactly what is going to happen. You create space for the kind of engagement with the people who have felt the pain, so that as collectively, now we go back to what I was saying earlier on about a social contract. That's how you build a unique social contract in a country. You get into a conversation, a truthful conversation with the citizens, and out of it emerges the solutions, the institutions, or the programs for dealing with difficult situations.
Recently, BZA and you as the leader launched the manifesto, which is going to, which is a Bible, which meant to convince voters to vote for you and your political party. What are the major issues that are in this book?
Okay, so there are 2 things. So it's in 2 parts. The first part is a very short one, and it talks about, you know, as you can tell, it's part of my obsession. Special social contract. You cannot do anything without making sure that every Zimbabwean feels valued, whether it's a Zimbabwean who is in the diaspora, you know, they are valued as Zimbabweans and they have a part to play in determining the direction of our country and building it. Whether it's a white man, whether it's a black man, whether it's somebody whose parents were originally from Malawi, but they lived here for the past 8 years, and this person was born here, and now they're feeling alienated because of some of the decisions on citizenship that were made before. So you build a unique social contract. You've got to do that. You've got to make sure that everyone, and now this needs to be something that is beyond parties. Every single Zimbabwean, whether they belong to the BZA or they belong to MDC or ZANU-PF, they are valued, you know. And for the past 37 years, that has not been the case. If you did not subscribe to the values of ZANU-PF, if you were not a card-carrying member of ZANU-PF, if you were not part of their structures and so on, there were certain things that you were, you couldn't do. And there were certain things that you couldn't access as a citizen, even though you were actually entitled to them. So that's the first part of our manifesto, building a durable, special social contract. And then you get to the 10-point plan, which forms the gist of our manifesto. And I can go through just a couple of the things in the 10-point plan. The first one is we're going to drastically cut public spending. We have got to drastically cut public spending by reducing the number of ministries to 15, and by eliminating all deputy minister positions, and by eliminating the office of second vice president, and by reducing the size of the legislature to pre-2013 levels. We've got to do that, because every time that a lot of times people look at a cabinet, they say we're 15 ministers. What people should be thinking about is we're 15 ministries as a result. You have 15 institutions. So the implications of just creating one more ministry on the public fiscus is a tremendous one. So we'll do that so that money can go where it is really supposed to go, which is the productive sector. The second one that I could talk about is it's very, very important for a government to aggressively promote and defend the constitutional rights of every Zimbabwean. Every Zimbabwean, even if these are people who don't support you, they don't have to support you to be Zimbabweans, but they can truly contribute to the building of their country if they feel like their rights are also protected and promoted. So along with that, one of the things that we're going to do is to establish a civil rights division within the Attorney General's office, which people can go to the civil rights division and say my rights were violated, and it doesn't matter who violated them. Whether it's the government who violated them, a party which violated them, a company, they will have the right to seek redress in court because of that. So that's just a couple of the examples of the things that are in our manifesto. But here's can I add one more?
Yeah, with pleasure.
Yeah. Let me talk about the devolving of the presidency, and I'll try to make that one quick so that I can sneak in another one. I truly believe that it's important for us to devolve the presidency. The president is the president of every province, of every person. Doesn't matter what party they belong to, you are their president, and you have a responsibility to make sure that you can draw attention to the needs in the provinces where these people live. So what we are going to do as the Build Zimbabwe Alliance is to make sure that the president is actually obligated to a week's residency in each province per month.
Okay.
And that's very critical for us, because this ties in with something else that we believe in very strongly. There's no way to resuscitate the national economy in Zimbabwe without resuscitating the economy of the provinces. There is no way. And the only way that you can make sure that there is equitable development in this country and every province has the attention of investors and so on is by the president actually being present there. Because the president's presence in a province attracts attention. And also, the president then gets to really know what is missing in those provinces. And that's a non-partisan, that time of residency, it must be constitutionally mandated that it's non-partisan. So the president cannot go there and organize a rally, for instance, of his people in the province during that time of residency. This is a national responsibility that they have as president. To make sure that they can mobilize people, make sure that the provincial business recovery and development plans for that particular province is actually being implemented. Make sure that the business engagement teams from that province are being supported. Make sure that the needs of the people in that province are actually heard at presidential level. So that's something that I'm very excited about.
So probably just picking one province, if we are to say Mashonaland East, if you are there, you've also been on the ground. What is it that you think it is lacking, or what is it that you think can be done in Mashonaland East so that the province and its people can develop?
Well, so you see, what we've had in the past 37 years, as you know, is really the decimation of a lot of the service centers, pretty much in every province. Not just service centers, towns as well. used to have thriving towns and so on. And this has also really impacted infrastructure and all that. So if you are going to have development in those provinces, some of the things that are these gaps that are there will actually be revealed by the presidential residency in that week. You'll really discover whether there is consistent electricity supply. Are there conference facilities in that place? Are there enough hotel facilities in that place? If you want to encourage, for instance, the National Tourism Plan, which is based on the study which was funded by the African Development Bank, and you want to make sure that each province can also have a thriving tourism sector, you know, are the facilities there? And just the fact that you are there, the focus is there during that presidential week, it will show you the things which are missing. And by the way, during that week, that week's cabinet meeting will be held in that province, because that will also ensure that everyone who is serving as a cabinet minister has really visited every province in this country. You know, so these things are important. And
one of the issues in Zimbabwe is Zimbabwe's backbone of the economy is agriculture. We have seen probably going 10 years back, year in, year out, farmers, they're being given inputs. Next year, another farming season, farming inputs. 5 years, I mean, consecutively, just being given those farming inputs. Where are we going?
Well, we all know why they get these farming inputs. I drove past Wedza yesterday, with the Growth Point yesterday, and all these people being given inputs already. We know why they're being given these inputs. It's a political strategy. It's making sure that these people vote for the person who is giving them political inputs. It's not an economic strategy. There's never been an economic strategy. So it must not surprise you that it has not yielded the economic results, because it was never an economic strategy.
Yeah, because we have seen every now and then the government importing maize, and yet the previous season all was done.
Yeah, so here's the thing. You've got to have a functioning economy. There's no other way of going around a functioning economy and the right, sensible policies which ensure that, you know, whatever people are doing, whether it's in agriculture or in industry, actually succeeds. And it creates a surplus. So if you're a farmer, you're able to farm and have enough left over a seed. You know, that's the way it's supposed to be. This thinking that we can actually have a thriving agricultural sector by giving people inputs is ridiculous. In fact, it's really not the goal. That's really not the goal. So it's not surprising that it has not succeeded.
Zimbabwe has no currency. BZA, what are your plans to bring in the Zimbabwean dollar? Well,
again, you know, all of these things. So what is a currency? A currency reflects the level of economic activity. The frequency of its value is determined by, you know, the frequency of economic activity, the magnitude of economic activity, and so on. If you don't have much economic activity in your country, it's hard for you to have a currency, you know. So you fix the economy. That's the thing that's important, by making sure that you have the right policy environment for people to come in and invest. That's one. But you also make sure, because the value of a currency is also determined by whether people trust the leadership that's there. That's the reason why if somebody is fired as finance minister, all of a sudden you see the value of a currency going down. So it's critical who is in leadership. It's absolutely critical. So if I may segue to something that is really important to me. There are a lot of people who say to us right now, give these people a chance. So let me ask you some questions from something that has been circulating on WhatsApp. No, I'm not going to be the journalist here, but there's something that has been circulating on WhatsApp. At the time when the $15 billion disappeared from Chiadzwa, who was the Minister of Defense? Emmerson Mnangagwa. At the time when the $15 billion disappeared from Chiadzwa, who was mining in Chiadzwa? Few companies, including the military. And as you know, during that time, you couldn't go to some of those areas. The military knew what was coming in and what was going out. They do. They did then, they know. Who was the commander of the army at that time? Chiwenga. Who was the minister of mines at that time? Robert Mugabe. Who was the Home Affairs Minister at that time?
Kembo
Mohadi, right? All these people are occupying very top positions in the current government. And people are saying, you need to trust them. Listen, international capital is not that stupid. you know, they know what they're dealing with. We Zimbabweans, in the words of Desmond Tutu, none so blind as those who choose not to see. We can't decide that, you know, all this is not important. It's important. So I say that to say, if you're going to have a stable currency, if you're going to have your own currency, you have to have people who are trusted to manage our financial policies right. You have to have people who are trusted when it comes to the investment policies in the country. You know, that's the only way that you end up with a stable currency and a currency of your own.
Assuming that you've won, what will be the first thing that you're going to do as the new president?
First thing that I would do as the new president is to get rid of POSA, get rid of AIPA, get rid of all these ridiculous laws in our books that criminalize citizenship.
They be advantageous to you once you're in power?
Why would they be advantageous to me? Because really, to be honest with you, the only thing that's advantageous to any Zimbabwean is a functioning economy where Zimbabwe's children are giving their all. Look, I want people to have, you know, I was in a European country recently, and, you know, when I got there, it was balmy, it was raining, you know, the weather was really, really miserable. But as I was on the train going to this place where I was going to meet someone, I couldn't help but marvel that, you know, these people, in spite of the bad weather and everything, they can make their countries work. They can make their countries work. There are people, if they want money from the bank, they can go and get their money from the bank. If their people want something to eat, it's there. You know, if they want to send their children to school, if they're sick, they can go to the hospital and everything. That's the Zimbabwe that I want. I want that Zimbabwe for myself. I want that Zimbabwe for my 95-year-old father. So it doesn't work to my advantage to have AIPA on the books. So the very first thing that would happen is we would get rid of AIPA, of POSA, of all these ridiculous laws that criminalize you know, the exercise of one's constitutional rights. That's number one.
If you are going to get a call from the current president, Indi Mnangagwa, and said, Noah, come to my office with other opposition leaders and say, let's form a government of national unity and take Zimbabwe forward, what would be your response?
How would we take Zimbabwe forward with that kind of leadership? Is the question that I would ask. I mean, why would we do that? Actually, we have an election coming up, right?
Assuming that that call comes and say, let's form a Zimbabwe, a government of national unity together, and we take Zimbabwe forward and revive our country.
There's a good way of reviving our country. A good way of reviving our country is making sure that we have free and fair elections and the Zimbabwean people are allowed to participate freely in that election. It's not some political arrangement, some agreement among politicians that will do that. Look, here is what pains me. There is this effort in this country to postpone the destiny of Zimbabwe's people. And it's really sickening, you know. There is no need for an arrangement which is outside freeing the electoral process and allowing Zimbabwe's children to elect the government that they want. And I truly believe that Zimbabweans are not stupid. If they are given the right to vote, to vote freely, they will vote into power the right government. We've never had that opportunity because the climate has always been skewed. So I would not entertain that. We have to have free and fair elections and allow Zimbabwe to move forward.
And in terms of the electoral reforms, what others do you think should be changed or amended before the 2018 general election? Well,
you know, one of the difficult things about the whole issue of electoral reform is that there are already some things that have advantaged ZANU-PF.
Okay.
So up to this point, and as you know, the registration process is going to end in a couple of weeks. They have always had the inside track when it comes to having advanced information about where the registration centers are, being able to bring their people to those registration centers, and you know, so they've had the inside track as far as that is concerned. Now, you know, short of actually extending the registration period so that we can get to 7 million people voting, what we have right now, and I think this is their calculation, there are people who have registered to vote. So, you know, that's troubling for me. But going forward, yeah, I mean, look, we need to make sure that every political party is allowed to campaign freely and fairly. And right now, yeah, we still need to apply for police clearance to hold our rallies and so on. Yeah, it is granted after 7 days, but I can tell you, ZANU-PF doesn't have to wait for 7 days. You know,
or maybe doesn't need to.
Doesn't even need to apply. I don't think. And you know, you go to the ZBC and you want to actually put something there on air and ask them for coverage, and they're not going to come and cover you, even though you know, we pay for the licenses for the ZBC. You know, things like that. And what other reforms are there? Freely allow people. You know, there are so many difficulties when it comes to running a political party in Zimbabwe. Even opening accounts. You know, the banks have been terrified by ZANU-PF. You know, saying, you know, you can't open an account, you know, because you are an opposition political party. You know, things like that. And now, is that something that is in a say, legislation or anything? No. It's the practice. So there are reforms, and then there's culture. You know, it's important for ZANU-PF to encourage the free exercise of one's constitutional rights, and that's something that we have to press for.
One hot issue: should Zimbabweans living abroad be allowed
absolutely.
to vote?
Oh yeah, that's you know, you're pressing my button right there, Tafuma. I am really disappointed by the fact that there are those who are canvassing for people to accept kuti zvinhu zvave nani and suspend whatever fight we have had to be able to vote. Mm-hmm. I am campaigning for the diaspora to be allowed to vote, even if they vote from Mnangagwa. It doesn't matter. It's your constitutional right. And here's what we hear all the time. It's very difficult to do that, you know. You went to register to vote. You know what's involved. There's somebody sitting behind the desk. There's a laptop right there. They enter your details. There's a little machine there that scans your fingerprints, and then they print the slip. That thing can fit in a suitcase. And you're telling me that's too difficult to actually put that thing in a suitcase and send it to one of our embassies overseas and turn that embassy into a registration center? And then they say they don't have money? Oh, are you kidding? You buy 200 and something cars for chiefs, you know, and you say you don't have money to actually get someone to exercise their democratic vote. That's nonsense. All our embassies can actually be registration centers. All our embassies can actually be polling stations. It's not that difficult, you know. And this whole idea that you know, someone would be denied their right to vote because the government says we don't have money, you know, it's just crazy.
You said yes, you want the Zimbabweans living in the diaspora to vote, and even if they vote for the current government, which is ZANU-PF led by ED. But why do you think the current government is against having those in the diaspora to vote?
Well, you know, I can only speculate, but, you know, I think many of us can speculate based on past history and the suspicions that the government has had of the diaspora whilst they are receiving their remittances at the same time. But, you know, all this suspicion that you have a regime change agenda as if changing of regimes is illegal. There's nothing illegal about regimes changing, you know. Otherwise, then that would be an admission by the military that what they did is illegal, right? You know, it's not illegal for people to exercise their constitutional right to change governments. It's not. But we heard that when Robert Mugabe was there. You know, you are agents of imperialism because you want regime change. And some of these guys need to be taught the very basics of democracy. You know, you can change governments. It's your constitutional right to change governments. In fact, that's how you ensure leadership renewal, so that you can bring in fresh ideas to build your country.
One of the issues in your manifesto, as I'm reading here, it says empowering women and the girl child. Where is the boy child?
No, well, you see, the thing about it is that you and I know there's always been a lopsided attention when it comes to the sexes. And I think we have to be proactive in terms of empowering those groups which have been culturally vulnerable. And the girl child is you know, we can't seriously say that the boy child is as vulnerable as the girl child. But creating a functioning economy for everyone, is really also empowering the girl child and the boy child. But, you know, the girl child has special needs, and special attention needs to be paid to the girl child, because we're living in a patriarchal society which, if you have a son and a girl, and you're a father, and you're going to make a decision as to who should go to school, the likelihood is that you're going to say the boy child is going to go to the school and the girl is not going to get their education. That's got to change in our country, you know, and that really speaks to the need to pay attention to the need of the girl child.
The former president, Robert Mugabe, once described gays and lesbians as Western pigs and dogs. Do these people have space in a new government?
Look, here's the thing that is sometimes troubling about the way we approach difficult issues like this. We fail to understand that when it comes to citizenship, everyone has rights. Everyone, as a citizen, as constitutionally defined, everybody has rights. And, you know, you can't pick and choose when it comes to that. Even a criminal has rights. So here is my approach. There are things that I don't agree with personally. There are things that we may not agree with culturally. There are things, you know, that may be abhorrent to us as Zimbabweans and so on. And certainly every country and every culture has a right to define what's acceptable to it and what is not, right? But if you look at the rights that we currently have in our constitution, and for me, those are what I'm going by, we must protect the rights of every Zimbabwean, which is actually outlined in our constitution.
So it means they will have space to do what they want in your government because it is their right to do so. No, you're putting words in my mouth. No, I'm asking you. That's why we are still here.
I say that we have a responsibility you have a responsibility as a government to protect the constitutional rights of every Zimbabwean. You do. And whatever those rights are, which are in your constitution, you have a right, you absolutely have a duty to protect them.
From 1980, the government inherited from what people have been saying, the great basket of Africa. What do you think went wrong with Robert Mugabe's government? Well,
you know, Tavuma, in fact, I'm so glad that you are actually asking that question, because I'm conflicted about that. Even as we were the breadbasket of Africa, people in the rural areas were still living in the 18th and 19th century. People were still having a lot of problems making ends meet. So that picture does not really paint an accurate picture of where the majority of Zimbabweans were, right? So, you know, people were still squatting in black toilets then, and people were really still struggling, you know, to subsist. The surplus that was being produced by our commercial agricultural sector, which enabled us to export and all of that, that was great for our economy and everything, but that's not the whole story. So in our manifesto, what we talk about is having an integrated rural development plan and agriculture recovery plan. Those two things have to be integrated. You have to make sure that the rural communities are not bypassed by pipes, irrigation pipes, going to water commercial facilities elsewhere. And the dam is right there next to the village, but the people in the village can't produce enough food for themselves. That's not a post-colonial reality. That was there even before independence. So yeah, I love the fact that we were highly productive during a certain time in our history, but the complete picture is that there were still people living in a previous century in the rural areas at that time. So it's important for us to integrate rural development and agricultural recovery.
We have seen with the current government, many people that have benefited in terms of their land reform program were close. It was a group of people that benefited taking over the thriving white commercial farms.
Yes.
What is your plan? Because some of them now you've passed through the said story.
Derelict,
Yes. Yeah. What is your plan in terms of that?
So, you know, one of the reasons why our manifesto starts with the social contracts and with this need for a conversation with the Zimbabwean people. We have to decide, what do we want as a country? First of all, I think that will be clear from how we are going to vote. We are going to vote in a certain way, and that's going to send a message where we want to go as a country. Here's where I believe that we want to go as a country. And here's where I believe that a really common sense discussion, even post the election, in the immediate period after the election, will lead us to. We want to be able to feed ourselves as a nation. We want to be able to employ people, even in the agricultural sector. We want to be able to thrive right through our economy. Everything needs to be thriving, whether it's industries, whatever it is that we do as Zimbabweans, needs to produce the surplus that really improves our well-being. I believe that that's what we want. So let's look at the land reform. The truth of the matter is that there was nothing wrong with the idea of land reform. We know that there were people who were dispossessed by the Land Apportionment Act and the Land Tenure Act. We know that. We know that there were Africans who were dispossessed. We also know that the commercial farming land in our country was being highly productive, even though there were those inequalities and injustices. So what needed to happen to correct that injustice was, how do we do this in such a way that we don't impact productivity, but we're still addressing the injustice? How do we do that? And I don't believe that that was seriously done. That conversation about accomplishing both goals. These two goals can't be mutually exclusive, the need for justice and the need for productivity. Now, today, here's what we need. How do we get to increased productivity and making sure at the same time that we also address the injustices of the land reform exercise? And that will really need Zimbabweans to come together and really agree on what we need to do. So, in my opinion, we've got to address the land question and put a stop to some of the things that are even going on now. I was reading in the paper the other day that there are still some white farmers who are being targeted for displacement. Even this long after the inception of this program, I mean, it's crazy. The second thing is, we also need to address the issue of the farms that are not being fully used. These are commercial farms. These are not places where people should just go with their families and have a braai. This is supposed to actually contribute to the economic well-being of the country. And something needs to be done about that, and we support a comprehensive land audit so that we can find out who owns what and what are these farms, commercial farms, that are being used for. And at the end of that audit, justice needs to be done. If there are people who have multiple farms and they're not utilizing those farms, they need to be taken from them. Then we need to decide as a country what we do with the issue of title. Because if we don't address that, it has broader economic consequences. It doesn't just affect agriculture, it affects industry, investment on the whole area of investment. So we have to make a decision about that and make sure that going forward, we're not going to racially profile someone who wants to be a farmer, because you and I know it doesn't take you being black to be a good farmer. Okay. Yeah.
Coming back to your government as well, you said you're going to have 15 ministers, yes, with no deputy ministers. How are you going to choose these people? Because we have heard in the previous government, I'm choosing technocrats, then the next one is Chimurenga cabinet. Yours will be built cabinet. What qualifications are there for one to be chosen to be the Minister of Education, Home Affairs, Agriculture, Land and Water Resources? Yeah.
No, that's a very, very good question. We want to, you are right, it's going to be a build cabinet. It's going to be a cabinet to build the country. So, look, there are various qualifications that you look at when it comes to choosing leaders, right? You make sure that they have the competencies to actually do the job. And in our country, what we have seen is that an incompetent minister of mines will be transferred and become Minister of Transportation, as if the transferring of that incompetence to the Ministry of Transportation, somehow something happens as they are moving offices, right? You see, it's very, very important if somebody demonstrates that they are competent for them to be appointed into the area of responsibility, which relates to their skills. So yeah, you look at what this person brings. What have they done before? And what can they do? What is their vision for that particular ministry? And you know what? It has to be, you can't just say, I'm appointing you. You really have got to talk to this person and really figure out if they have the energy, the competency, and the integrity to bring to that particular portfolio. So, yeah, I mean, it's like appointing a CEO of a company. What do? You do your due diligence. You find out where they have worked before, what they've done before, what they bring to the table, and then you make, you make the deployment.
Your views and comments are welcome on the program. Remember to like our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, and be the first to see as it happens. Watching TV on the go. Sly Media TV, building bridges.
Look, here's what my focus is on. My focus is on encouraging Zimbabweans to register in unprecedented numbers, even in these last few days. And on election day, to turn out in unprecedented numbers to vote. And dare this government, even though there's an uneven playing field, dare this government to ignore the will of the people. Dare them to do that. And that's all we can do. We can demand, we can push, we can say whatever we want. But in fact, this government has demonstrated for 37 years they are very tone deaf. They will do what they want to do. But I think that it's important now for the Zimbabwean people to do what they can. And what I believe they can is go and register to vote. And on election day, go out there and vote in massive numbers and dare this government to ignore your will. Well, every political party looks for an emblem and something that energizes your imagination and so that. And, for us, the horse is a perfect symbol for that. People measure the strength of a car in terms of a car engine, in terms of horsepower. So for us, it's really an incredible symbol, which talks about energy, resiliency, and endurance, and all of that. So we encourage people to manyane biza, in that spirit. That run with the vision that is not tired, that doesn't tire. That's not going to be outlasted by others. That is resilient. That is confident, and so on. So that's where that came from.
One of the great leaders once said, there are 3 ways that are very difficult to say, I am sorry. And we have seen it, we discussed about it when we started this interview, when someone was asked whether he was going to say, I am sorry, and he had to dilly-dally on that question. If you have this kind of a platform in your career as a politician, who do you want to say, I am sorry to?
I really want to say I'm sorry to the next generation. I really want to say I'm sorry to the next, honestly, because I think, our country is in the situation that it is in, because some of us chose comfort over a calling. Some of us decided that, we wanted to go out there and enjoy ourselves and be able to educate our children and go for holidays and so on, instead of actually believing that we could do that here in our country if we fixed it. That's the generation I'm sorry to, the next generation. And that's why I'm so committed to making sure that we can do the right thing.
You've lived in the diaspora for quite a long time. How are Zimbabweans coping outside there?
It's tough for a lot of Zimbabweans, even the Zimbabweans who are financially and economically comfortable. There comes a time when something says this is not your home. Obviously there are those who don't care. But for there are a lot of Zimbabweans who deeply care about Zimbabwe, and at some point, they come to this realization: man, I may be here, I may be driving 2 cars and all of that, but this is not my country. And in my case, one of the things that happened, it has been happening over the years, is my children, the high point of their life is when we would say we're coming home to Zimbabwe. They loved coming home because to them this is their home. And it's kind of difficult to explain sometimes to your children after a while, why are we not living here?
And what has been your answer when at one point maybe they've asked you, why are we not living here?
Well, my answer has always been to my children that we will go back home one day.
Okay.
Yeah, that has always been my answer to them.
Yeah. So what will be your word to them, the Zimbabweans that are living in the diaspora, under the conditions that you're talking about?
I would say to the Zimbabweans living in the diaspora, you know what, we have a responsibility now to make sure that in our lifetime we can truly redeem our country and do whatever you can, even if it's difficult. Do the little that you can, make yourself available, come home and run for elections, you know, if you can, if you believe that you can really bring about change, or support the person in your community who is running for political office. You know, find the person who is running for political office who is the right person, who you know has the right ideas, and support that person. And never forget your country. You know, this is your country, this is your heritage, and do everything in your power to participate.
If you go to any growth point, if you go to any city, town in Zimbabwe, everyone is vending.
Yeah.
How are you going to approach that in your first 100 days?
Yeah, well, you know what? I heard someone say something really interesting, and it was Sten Zorwadza, who is the chairman of the Vendors Association, that it's time now for us to change what we call these people, you know, because there are a lot of negative names that are used for vendors. These are our entrepreneurs. These are these are people who have a very, very serious commitment to making ends meet. And it's time to empower the informal sector in this country. So this question of vendors, someone said something interesting recently, and it was Sten Zorwadza, the chairperson of the Vendors Association. He says, you know, sometimes we demean these people by giving them names like Magweja. In fact, he was talking about the informal sector as a whole, not just vendors. And in fact, in the end, we convince ourselves that they're a nuisance. But these are people who are, you know, trying to make ends meet, you know. And a lot of them do it in very, very creative ways as well. And it's time we started looking at them as entrepreneurs and you know, the builders of tomorrow's institutions and industries. So what is it that we need to do in the first 100 days? Make sure that we can find ways of creating capital pools to help those people who are in the informal sector and capacitate them so that they can move from the informal sector into the formal sector. In fact, if you look in our manifesto, we talk about setting up this fund, particularly to support artisanal miners, which is almost $500 million, and another $300 million fund, innovation fund for young people, to turn their innovative ideas into projects and companies and so on. That's very, very critical. And I know that there is support out there for those kinds of things. We are going to build our economy from the inside out, not just from people coming in and investing in our country, but by actually helping those people who are already in. So for instance, what would you rather have? There's a guy at CSO right now who's making window frames and door frames. What would you rather have? Find capital to actually support this person so that they can increase what they are doing and build an entity that provides even more employment, or get somebody to come from outside and establish a company that puts that person you know, out of business. I think what we want is a combination actually of these two things, where you support indigenous people who are doing things at a small scale, and you also bring in others who can do the things that we are not doing ourselves at a local level. And there's a partnership between FDI and indigenous initiatives.
We have seen the previous government looking east. Where is the government going to look?
Good question. Look, in fact, this really is a very, very good question, because what we don't realize a lot of times is that every government it does what is in the best interest of its people. China built the AU headquarters in Ethiopia so that it would have an inside track when it comes to relationships with African governments, so that when it comes to signing deals and all of that, you know, it would be an advantage over others. And you can't blame them for that. You know, they're doing that in the interest of their countries. We need to develop the kind of foreign policy that puts Zimbabweans first. That's very, very important. And wherever that leads, whatever relationships that leads to, that's fine. But, you know, you can't just say, we're going to look east. The Chinese come in here and, you know, you sign deals with them where they bring their wheelbarrows and their hose pipes and everything. And they bring the labor and so on. And it's to our disadvantage. And at the end of the day, when they've built whatever they've built, we still owe them money. you know, these people are not stupid. They don't do things in your interest necessarily, but they do things in their national interest. So wherever our national interest leads us in terms of international relations, that's where we'll look.
Recently, the American president described some other African countries as shitholes. Do you think Zimbabwe, 37 years after independence, is in that category? We
should fix our country. That's what we should do. We should stop listening to people who are getting exercised about, you know, people who are insulting us and so on. Look, what does that change? You know, there are some people who even encourage, let's demonstrate. Demonstrate against what? Look, we just need to fix our country. You know, other people, you know, they are exercising whatever the right they have to call us whatever. But really, the person in Murambinda doesn't care that Trump said our country is what. You know, it's actually people in the cities a lot of times and who are on social media and so on who get very worked up about that. Look, get more worked up about the situation of people in our locations, not about what Trump says. You know, get worked up about, you know, how people are dying in hospitals because there's no medical care. Get more worked up about the fact that a president who says, I'm taking the country in a new direction, would buy cars for chiefs instead of actually saying, okay, chiefs, you are here. Look at the leadership capital that's there. 200 and something chiefs are there. Okay, here's what we're going to do, guys. Instead of buying new cars, whatever is allocated for that, I want to give you this money to set up a hospital in your chieftaincy. You know, I mean, we need a change of the way that we think. So whatever Trump calls our country, we must fix our country. You know, that's our responsibility.
Yes,
you know.
Doctor, we have been told that quite a number of Zimbabweans live in the rural areas. But if we go there, sometimes we don't see these people. But when we are in the urban areas, the infrastructure cannot cope with the number of people that are living in urban areas.
Yes.
Do you think demographically is correct and it's true, or it is a political statement that may be used to rig elections by saying the ruling party stronghold is in the rural areas? So when it comes to counting the voters, they will say, because it is our stronghold, so you expect quite a number of people to be in Murambinda. But if you go there, you know, house by house, there might not be that, you know.
That could be. That could be. I've never trusted the numbers that are proffered by the Zimbabwean government anyway in the past 20 years or so, because things are so broken, it's hard to account for anything.
Because I've seen everyone who finishes school comes to the urban area. Who finishes, so how then is the number continue growing and becoming a stronghold of one political party?
Yeah, you know, to be honest with you, I suspect that there's some fudging of the numbers there. But here's the thing. To address the issue that you're talking about of urban congestion and so on, we have to service even the rural communities. We have to really, that's why I said we need an integrated agricultural recovery plan and a rural development plan. If we do that, because the person who is in the rural areas doesn't need to feel that they can't live in the rural areas in order for them to have a good life. You can have running water, because all it takes in a village with 10 houses and so on is to have one common tank which is elevated, and then you service you know, that community. And you know, what it takes to do that is also conscientizing our people in the cities. You know, you have a home in the rural areas. You know, why is it that you're a CEO of a company, but when you go to your home area, you're still squatting in a pit latrine? You know, it says something about not just governments, but also the way that we educated Zimbabweans who are in the upper income bracket, the way we think. You know, so there has to be a conscious investment in the development of rural infrastructure as well, because then that will make it easier for people to stay there. You know, they must feel like they can be on the internet, even in the rural areas. They can watch television, you know, they can watch sports and so on. And that's very, very important. Then you're going to address the issue of urban congestion.
In 1 minute, why should I and them vote for BZA?
You know, we have done what we needed to do to honor the Zimbabwean people by presenting our ideas, doing our due diligence, and releasing this manifesto. You know what? There is nobody who is entitled to the vote of the Zimbabwean people. We must all work for it. Here's one thing that I can promise you. We are going to work hard for your vote. We are not going to take it for granted. We believe that there are many Zimbabweans who could do a great job of rebuilding our country, and all we are doing is presenting our ideas and saying this is who we are. You know, test us, question us, connect with us, and find out if we are the people who we say we are. And at the end of the day, I truly believe that if you do, you're going to find that indeed.
Dr. Manyika, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
This is your program, #TheCandidate 2018. Are you aspiring to be one of the leaders? Get in touch with our producers on the numbers that are on the screen or in the inbox. On behalf of the technical crew, Julius Patterson, Evans Tawaguta, and Sylvester Tafumane, my name is Robert Tafumane. See you in the next program. Bye-bye.